Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going back to 1916 in an event I think, Chris, most of our listeners probably know very little to nothing about, and that is an explosion on what was called Black Tom Island up in New York, in the New York Harbor. This is a fascinating tale because it may be the first foreign terrorist attack on American mainland.
Yeah, if there's ever been an episode that we did that truly underscores the name of our podcast, History You Didn't Know But Should, it's the Black Tom Island explosion, because it is what some would consider to be the first, terrorist attack on the United States. But also, what you find out is this is one of the largest explosions ever to occur on U.S. soil. And Ray, very few people know anything about it, but it comes about in a critical moment in American history, because it's 1916. You have World War One, which has been going on for a couple years now, and the United States, Woodrow Wilson has said, he ran on the political campaign. He kept us out of the war. The United States is remaining officially neutral, but we weren't really neutral. And because of some of the things that we were doing, it made places such as Black Tom Island a major target, because it was a huge munitions depot, and that got a lot of people, especially foreign adversaries, interested in it.
Yeah, and um, you know, it's it's just one of those things that you just don't think about. Um, when you think about terrorist attacks on the United States, you think about, obviously 9/11, you think about the first World Trade Center attack, you may think about the Olympic bomber, those type of things. But this is one that occurred, and I guess because it occurred in the context of World War One, it's sort of been lost to some degree to history. Um, and the events of that day really need to be brought back to the light, so to speak, so that people can understand what happened there so close to the Statue of Liberty. And Chris, as you know, we've already done, I believe, an episode on the Statue of Liberty. So this is right, literally just a little ways away from where the Statue of Liberty was standing then, and indeed stands today. You could see the Statue of Liberty from where Black Tom Island is located.
Yeah, and as we're saying, the war is ongoing. The Great War, World War One, is taking place, and we have chosen to remain neutral. However, our allies, Great Britain and France, are heavily involved in the war, and one of the things that we are doing is, uh, unofficially, quietly, off the books, we are selling millions of dollars of weapons to Great Britain and France so that they use against the Germans. And in the summer of 1916, there are these freight cars that are sitting on Black Tom Island. And, they have, tons of TNT and explosives and munitions. And what they're going to do is they're going to place them onto these ships, and these ships are going to cross the Atlantic, and they are going to make their way to Great Britain and France to be used against Germany. But Ray, there's a problem. Long before 9/11, long before any of these major security things are installed, you have an island that has all of these weapons, and hardly anybody is watching it or guarding it, if you will. And so it really is a very attractive place for people who are looking to do damage to America. It's a very attractive place for them to look at doing harm.
Okay, so let's talk about the events that occurred on the evening of July 30, 1916. And that's a very important year for me because that's the year my grandmother was born. So it's a very easy date for me to remember. But July 30th, 1916, New York Harbor, Black Tom Island. Um, there are some guards there, not a lot, like you said. It wasn't a heavily guarded location. They begin to notice some fires burning on the island. Okay. And these guards, of course, immediately realizing what was there on the island, fled. They hauled boogied out of there because they knew what was there on the island. But before they fled, the Jersey City Fire Department um, was called, and shortly after 2 a.m., there was a huge explosion as these fires met all the ammunition, all the explosive that was there on that island. And it, according to what I have read, Chris, it not only was a big explosion, it actually registered on the Richter scale as a 5.5 earthquake. I mean, you think about that. This explosion was so massive, it was so big, it was so powerful that it was picked up on the Richter scale, which is, that's just mind boggling how powerful this explosion was. And Chris, thinking about how powerful it was, how big it was, what amazed me, nobody died as a result of this explosion, which, I said earlier, maybe the fact that it happened in the context of World War One is why a lot of people haven't heard about it. But maybe that's another reason people haven't heard about it, is because nobody died. There were people who were injured, but nobody died because, Chris, the people who were on the island knew it's best to just go ahead and leave.
Yeah, I mean, you could feel it, they said, as far away from Baltimore, Philadelphia, and many people thought it was like this huge bomb that was just going, and uh everything just vanquished. And I thought it was interesting that there was somebody who was at Ellis Island, where the immigrants were being processed through Ellis Island. They were forced to evacuate. Even the tallest skyscraper in the world at the time, which was the Woolworth Building in New York, they feared that the explosion, which was so bad, they feared that the world was ending. And one paper even reported that when they heard the blast and they saw the blast, that people got down on their knees and they prayed. It was that devastating. And Ray, if you put it into money, which not what we want to do, but let's just really understand how significant this was. In 1916 money, it was estimated that it did $20 million in damage, which is more than $500 million today. I mean, you've got the entire Black Time Island, which is just destroyed. You've got so much that takes place. But not only that, think about the other economic harm that's going to take place. America is making millions of dollars by selling all of these weapons to Germany and France. And now that they're all gone, that's going to create a huge economic disparity for America. And you're already feeling the pinch because it's an election year. You've got a lot of things going on. You've got Woodrow Wilson, who's running for president. He kept us out of the war. You got some people who want to go to war. You have immigrants from Germany that are here. You've got people who don't like the Germans, that don't like the others that are involved. So, Ray, this is a very troubling thing that happens in America in 1916. And then, after all of this happens, comes the investigation. Now we need to figure out, who is it? Who's responsible? How did they get on this island? How could they do such massive explosions? And Ray, the way they did it and who did it was very surprising.
Yeah, and the investigation didn't get off to a really good start, because what the investigators do is they first, of course, turn their attention to guess who? The poor guards who were on the island, and they said, well, you must have done something that caused this explosion. Maybe it wasn't deliberate. Maybe you weren't trying to do damage or create an explosion, but you must have done something. So they are the first targets of this investigation, the people who were guards on Black Tom Island. However, after some investigating, there was no way to tie the explosion to any of the activities that the guards were doing that night. In other words, they couldn't find, excuse the pun, they couldn't find a smoking gun. They couldn't find anything on the guards that led them to think, well, the guards were responsible for it. So really, the initial investigation into the explosion was, well, this was an accident. Whether the guards did it or somehow somebody else did it, it was not done on purpose. It was an accident. But there were those, Chris, who began to bring up the possibility of German involvement in this explosion. And one thing I found very interesting was there was resistance to that idea. It wasn't like, oh, yeah, it was the Germans. We knew it was those Germans. No. In fact, Woodrow Wilson himself didn't really accept that theory at first. It was something that the German immigrants in the United States had done a very good job of becoming, sort of integrating into the country, and they were not a group that was at first suspected of this particular action. But of course, the more time has moved on, the more things were learned. It looks like that may indeed have been what happened.
Well, you don't want it to be the Germans,
No.
because if it is the Germans, what are you going to do? You're going to go to war.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've already seen what the Germans are doing with these U-boats and with bombs, and the creativity that they're using with weapons. And I understand why Wilson didn't want to believe it was the Germans. I understand why we wanted to just please let it be somebody else, please, please, please. But at the end of the day, you have to allow the investigation to take you where it's going to take you, regardless of what you want. And what we find to be so interesting, as you mentioned about this, is not just who it was, which eventually it comes to be three German spies, but two of them just simply rowed across the New York harbor and just docked on shore and walked right up. And then another one, he walked in from the main gate with all of these cigar-shaped bombs on his possession. And I thought it was interesting because there is a story that says that it was so easy for these German saboteurs or these spies to infiltrate Black Tom Island, that after placing the bombs along the island, that one of them who actually fled uh, was screaming out loud, "Oh my goodness, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done?" This concept of, I have just created a devastating set of events in America. And, I mean, $500 million of damage, to the point that, I mean, structures, um, the sales of all of these weapons. But Ray, not only just the sales, but what happens if we have to go to war? We've just lost all of these weapons. I mean, this is huge when it comes to military purposes, because you're talking about 2 million pounds of munitions that we could have used for some type of war maneuver. So this was a very, very devastating event that happened in American history, and for it to be done by three individuals truly was a terrorist event.
Yeah, and it actually goes back to 1914 when the first of these individuals, Count Johann von Burstorff, and I do not know how to pronounce German, so that's the best I can do. He arrives in 1914. He comes with what is clear, at least in retrospect, is being not so friendly motives. This other guy who was responsible for what they called the pencil bomb, and they believe he had actually destroyed several ships. This guy had been involved in other attacks on American military targets throughout the war. And then you have this other guy, Slovak immigrant, who was living in New Jersey by the name of Michael Kristoff, who I think is the guy, Chris, who actually carries out the attack and making sure the fires are started, and where they're started, they're on Black Tom Island, so that the munitions depot would explode, would catch fire and explode at the right time. So, like you said, just three individuals who, I'm sure there were more individuals behind the scenes in Germany, etc., but just three individuals, in the United States were seemed to be responsible for this massive explosion, which, as you said, it did a lot of damage to property. It did a lot of damage to what could be America's military capabilities, but it wasn't one that created a lot of human suffering, so to speak. It was, it's not like it killed thousands of people or hundreds of people. So it was a bad event. It was a tragic event, but it could have been a lot worse than it actually was. And I guess the fact that Black Tom Island was a weapons depot and not a park or something, not a city block, is probably was very important in making sure lives weren't lost.
And ultimately, it wasn't the FBI. The FBI hadn't been formed yet, but it was the Bureau of Services. I forget what they were called, who does complete the investigation and are able to tie the Black Tom explosion to these German spies. And it is at that point where America starts saying, well, wait a second, you've cost us millions of dollars. You must be held responsible somehow, some way. And so it's 1921, after years and years of investigating and discussions and all. But in 1921, America, through the use of Lehigh Valley Railroad, which is the supplier of the munitions, kind of using their transportation system to get the goods to Great Britain and France, they would use a treaty that had been formed in 1921 between the United States and Germany to request reparations, to basically tell Germany, hey, you owe us. You're going to have to pay for this damage, the munitions, everything that we lost. We're coming to you. You need to pay us money. And of course, Germany is, like, no, we didn't do it. It's not us. I don't know what you're talking about. We don't know anything. A lot of hemming, a lot of hawing, a lot of things that are going on. And, finally, in 1939, you have what's known as the German American Mixed Claims Commission. Mm-hmm. It comes together and investigates this. And finally, both sides, the Germans and the Americans, agree that Germany was responsible for the Black Tom explosion, and Germany was ordered to pay $50 million in reparations to America. However, 1939, Germany was heavily involved in something else that was going on, and that was when
Just a little war.
So yeah, this was when Hitler decided to invade Poland and basically set off World War II, and that means no money, no reparations. And it won't be until I think the 1950s when Germany finally agrees to pay $50 million. And the final check is written in 1979, which is 63 years after the Black Tom explosion. So we got to give Germany their due. They did pay in part, but Ray, it took forever for them to acknowledge it and to admit it, and then for America to get the money for it.
Yeah, and if our listeners would like to go visit Black Tom Island today, the answer to that question is you can't. Black Tom Island really doesn't exist anymore, at least the weapons depot. In the years following the explosion, the island was, through construction work and everything, was made part of Liberty Island, which is the island where, of course, the Statue of Liberty is. So if you go there today, the Statue of Liberty is off in the distance, but at one of the corners, there is a circle of American flags. And it is in that circle of flags that you'll find a commemorative plaque pointing out where this weapons depot was there on Black Tom Island, which, of course, like I said, is now part of Liberty Island, and it doesn't exist anymore. as its own place. But Chris, we mentioned real quickly the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty was nearby. I mean, it was nearby. It was something that was damaged in the explosion. Do you know how much damage was done to the statue?
So I in today's money, I can't even begin to imagine.
It's about $100,000 at the time.
Hmm.
But it still affects the Statue of Liberty today, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and that's the sad thing about it, because there is a takeaway from today, and that is that the shrapnel, which listening to these eyewitness accounts just fascinates me. 3 4 pound munition shells that are flying everywhere and just going in all sorts of places. And Ray, is totally off subject, but back in my younger days, I was a volunteer firefighter. And I remember getting a call saying that there was a structure fire at a residence, and we loaded up and we took the engine and we're going to go and got to the house. And we were dragging all of the hoses off the truck. We were getting ready to approach the house, and right, all of a sudden there was this pew, 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 pop, 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 pop. I mean, stuff starts going everywhere. And we had to duck and take cover. I had to back the engine up. We stopped. I mean, the house was going to burn to the ground because this man had stored 15 years worth of fireworks in his house. And so when the house caught fire, it lit every single one of those fireworks. And those things started, I mean, shrapnel going everywhere. And it was a very, very dangerous period. And so you see this happening, in 1916, and it hit the Statue of Liberty. And the way that it affects us today is that it did significant damage to the torch. And the torch used to be a place where you could climb up to the torch of the Statue of Liberty, and it gave you some of the most panoramic, most beautiful views that you could see of New York City. But Ray, because of all that shrapnel, the torch was deemed unsafe for visitors. And even today, guests are still barred from being able to enter into that highest part of the Statue of Liberty. So the Black Tom affair, history you should know, but we didn't. Look at what has happened. When we look at the Statue of Liberty and say, oh, I sure would like to go up there, we can't. And if you ever need to know why, as you said, go look for the circle of flags, go look for the sign that says Munitions Depot, and that will be your answer.
Yeah, history impacts today. It always does.
Hey, that was good right there. You usually don't do very well with puns, but that impact in relating to munitions,
think about it.
wow. I mean, that's just caused me to have a blast with this episode. Great job.
Yeah, it was a hoot.
You ended it with some fireworks.
I did. I ended it on a bright note.
Or
Okay.
on a bang.
Yeah, on a bang. I hope our listeners have enjoyed this episode and learned something about what many consider to be the first terrorist attack on American soil by a foreign body. Until next time, I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.